Starting our proportional diagram, we will be working with a proportional system from Paul Richet, and he uses a 7.5 heads figure. I'm going to tell you more about what that means in a minute. But to get started, we need to make a grid in our sketchbooks to make things a little laid out kind of nicely. I've given myself a 1-inch margin at the top, so I've measured down 1 inch and made a line. Then I've measured down from there 7 inches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then given myself another 1/2 inch. So that's the 7.5 figure right there. So measured all the way down to 7.5. Then from that 7.5 inch mark, I've gone back up 4 inches. So the green lines are like 1/2 inch off from the pencil lines, if that makes sense. I've also given myself some midlines. I'm going to do an anterior view of the skeleton and then a lateral view. And I've made this 4 inches over from the wires of my sketchbook. So 4 there, 4 here. And then another middle line 7 inches over. So get that chart going and then we'll start. So Paul Richet was a French artist and essentially statistician who, through a number of measurements, determined that the average, not the ideal, but the average height of a person, of a grown adult, is 7.5 heads tall. And what he means by that is that if you take the height of the head and count it down, what you're going to see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. That half is a little confusing, so we're going to keep coming back to that. He also found that other parts of the body correspond to similar relationships. So from the hand to the base of the wrist is equal to 1 head height. From the wrist to the back of the ulna, kind of the end of the elbow, is another head height. And from there to just before the head of the humerus is another head height. And you can see in this kind of famous illustration, there are all kinds of other measurements that he's found, other kind of points of comparison. This is a really useful diagram, but it's a little visually hard to understand. The other problem with this diagram is that it includes locations or includes landmarks like the navel, or the crest of the buttocks here, that are sort of variable, that are dependent on people's build, dependent on their age, that the bony landmarks are a little easier to find and to kind of measure. So we're going to do a variation of this, and you can almost see and hear the skeleton. We're going to create a skeletal proportional model. And this model is applicable to both male and female bodies. We're going to start by labeling our diagrams at the top. Anterior, meaning the front view, and lateral. And we'll start with the anterior view. I've included also on Moodle 2 views of our Skelly diagram, or Skelly model, kind of matching the proportional views that we're going to make. You're welcome to print those out or to just look along at them. Because they have a point of view and there's actually some perspective at play, the perspective, if you were to, or the proportion, if you were to actually physically measure it in the skeletal model, is a little wonky. So we're going to be using the Richet diagram to kind of find these landmarks, and this is just going to give us some kind of shape ideas. All right, so starting with the anterior view, we're going to start at the top. The head is obviously 1 head high. The top of the skull is kind of a circle, and it narrows coming down to the jaw. So I'm making a very simple kind of head shape here, taller than it is wide. I'm drawing this dark enough for you to see it. And then I know the neck attaches to the sternum about half a head height down. So I can have my spine coming down. Rib cage begins just a little bit above the sternum, so a little bit above that halfway point, and continues to just above here. And the rib cage is a little bit like a flattened egg shape. Wider at the bottom. The sternum stops just at that second line. So 1, 2, 3. The xiphoid process, that kind of pointy spot, is right at the bottom, right below that point. Okay. At this third line, we have the very top, the crest of the humerus. Actually, I made this a little too high. Got a little bit more space. Crest of the humerus and the pelvis. Sorry, the crest of the pelvis, not the humerus, is a little wider than the rib cage. And I'm stopping just above that fourth measurement. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the spine. The pubic symphysis, it's just below this green mark. So that kind of simplified angular bowl shape of the pelvis. Put that in there. That's the pubic symphysis right there. Now we've gone through the kind of head and the trunk of the body, and now we have to sort of skip half a head up. So we've gone 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see that these boxes sort of overlap that half head from the top that we counted down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to sketch in the legs starting right at that halfway line, right through the top of that green. Bones of the femur come out at an angle and drop forward. Skeletons always look a little knock-kneed. The knees are kind of bending inward. And 2 head heights up from the floor, we have the articular plane of the knee. And I'm going to spell this all out for you so you can see what I'm saying, but it's where the bone of the femur articulates, connects, sits on top of the tibia, the bone of the lower leg. And the femur stops kind of wide, kind of boxy, curves inward. Top of the femur has kind of a knob, a great trochanter, and I'll spell that out as well. And the ball of the humerus, the ball of the femur that fits into the acetabulum of the hip. Tibia meets the femur, drops down. The tibia is towards the inside, the larger bone of the lower leg. And the fibula, the smaller bone of the lower leg, sits just outside that. The fibula drops down low, the tibia ends high. And then you have the bones of the ankle and the feet, and we're going to just kind of generalize those. A little bit more. That looks a little better. Okay. I'm kind of correcting for symmetry here of the patella. So the knee bone sits right on top of the articular plane. It's just above halfway. It's kind of like a little Superman shape. Alright, so we have top of the head to the chin, the base of the sternum, crest of the pelvis, and then below the great trochanter. Here we have to the middle of the shin, the articular plane of the knee, middle of the femur, and just above the pubic symphysis. Alright, I can include the arm on this, so starting with the middle of, or the top of the sternum, see clavicle coming out at an angle, shoulder blade behind, kind of supporting that shape. The ball of the humerus. And this drops down to just below, so just above the crest of the hip bone. Bones of the lower arms kind of kick out to the side. Hand ends. Right at the middle of the femur there. The ulna and the radius. The radius starts small and wide. Ulna starts wide and small. So we're looking at there, up there. And then to the side, we can also refer to Richet's diagram that he has from the end of the hand, one head to the base of the wrist, two heads to the end of the ulna, and another head basically to the ball of the humerus. And you can see that here. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a little bit less than a full head height when the arm is extended from the end of that marker to the center of the body. So we're going to take our ruler and say this is 4 inches out and a little bit less than 4 inches out. So if the arm is extended, you have 1, 2, 4 marks. And a little bit less than a head height. So we have the clavicle curving around again, supported by the scapula behind. The ball of the humerus just inside that mark, out, the kind of flare at the base of the humerus. And then our hand ends here. I'm going to make kind of a mitten shape for that, with the thumb pointing up. The radius starts small and ends large. The ulna, which is actually starting behind here, large and ends small. Do this in red. So that's 1, 2, 3. We're also going to do a lateral view of the skeleton. See, I printed that out as well. And you can find this image on Moodle. I'm going to keep this real simple, but it's nice to see them both together. So the base of the skull starts a little higher, drops forward, beginning of the neck in the front is about half a head height down from the chin. And in a funny way, the ribs seem to tilt forward. The base of the neck seems to be lower than the back of the neck. Then we've got that kind of egg shape again. In this case, it's a tilted egg, tilted, rolled backwards. You can see that in the image really nicely here. S-curve of the spine follows that shape. Crest of the hips, kind of far back, tilt forward. From the side, it's helpful to think of a tilted box. Cutting this in the pubic symphysis. It's just below that mark. We'll put a little asterisk there. Spell that out when we get to the end here. The ischium, the lower part of the pelvic bone. The sacrum, tailbone, and then the spine coming through the middle. So that's floating just above that fourth head there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, just above there. The ball of the femur hits a little higher than the base of the pelvis. They kind of overlap. And then the great trochanter is right behind that. The femur leans forward, so following that midline, trying to make our figure feel balanced. The femur leans forward. Has kind of like a bulge at the back. Cuts in. Patella sits in front. Remember, this is where the femur and the tibia, where they meet. Kind of like a box shape together, rectangular shape. We're only seeing a little bit of the tibia because it's hidden by the fibula, the bone that kind of hugs against the tibia on the lateral side of the body, as you can see from the side. And the heel, coming back, going with the heel, and then the foot. The foot itself is about a head height. So if I wanted to be real specific, I could actually measure that. Yeah, making it a little too big. All right, and I'm going to leave the arm out of this for clarity, even though I can see it in my skeleton. I feel like this is a little easier to read without the arm. All right, so now I have my proportions. A couple of things to pay attention to from the base of the floor, where the heel hits, to the base of the knee. The articular plane of the knee is the same amount of space from the articular plane of the knee to the top of the femur. So if you look at that kind of dent in the side of somebody's hip, the attachment of the top of the femur to the hip bone, that's about equally spaced. You'll also notice the middle of the body, the entire middle of the body, is that pubic symphysis right there, just about the middle. So that's right at the base of the pelvis there. I'm going to write out the rest of my information and then I'm done with my proportional diagram. All right, so this is Paul Richer, R-I-C-H-E-R, 7.5 heads. And the important terms that we talked about, yes, it's pubic symphysis SYMPHYSIS. Articular plane of the knee. And that's it. Oh, great trochanter.